So this is our last section in this chapter, chapter 7, and our topic is innovation. And so we've talked a bit about innovation in our past unit on entrepreneurship and innovation, but it's worth recapping here, particularly from the perspective of a management hat as opposed to potentially an entrepreneurial or a pure innovation hat. And so we make this distinction initially between the idea and the definition of creativity versus innovation. And so we can think of creativity as just the ability to combine ideas in a new or unique way, or to make these kind of unusual associations. Whereas innovation is actually the process of taking it out into the world in a way that creates value for somebody. So we can have something that is creative but is not innovative if we don't actually take it out into the world, or if nobody sees the value in it. And so if we're thinking about innovation as a process, and again, this is sort of, for you guys that are more in the creative industries, this is probably a more intuitive process for you. But generally speaking, the work that's been done looking at what innovation is and how it works, it tends to go through these 4 phases. So first of all, the ability to actually perceive and see new ideas, and to bring them together in ways that we can then incubate them. So we think about this as being able to kind of spot things out in the world in a creative way. So making these new and novel either associations or generating new ideas, allowing them to incubate and cultivating them in some way. The phase of inspiration, which is where we get that moment of aha, which is where we kind of are able to kind of see how the things that new novel idea that we've been incubating, how it might translate out into the real world, and how it might create value for somebody. And then the actual innovation itself, which is the physical manifestation of those ideas that have been created, and then being implemented. So innovation can be anything from a whole new, like an invention, a whole new product, to ways of improving processes. So an innovation can be something as simple as just a new way of doing something that is more effective than another way. And being able to actually implement it well is part of that innovation process. And so if we're thinking about trying to have innovative organizations, and organizations that have an innovation capacity, we've got these 3 sort of different aspects to it. So I'll just hopefully very quickly run through them all. So first of all, now that we know all about structure, so how the organization is actually assembled and organized, and we know about the distinction between mechanical structures, so very hierarchical, top down, as opposed to the more organic structures. Innovation tends to go much more along with having that more organic structure. Abundant resources, so this is everything from time, money, people, stuff, physical resources, intellectual resources, all these kinds of things. When they're in abundance, we have a greater innovation capacity. Although there is a new term, I've got a friend doing her PhD on a term called frugal innovation, which is particularly based in developing countries, and it looks at people who have low resources and are able to create innovative ideas from having limited resources. And so sometimes we talk about this idea of constraint being the mother of invention. And so, we can kind of play around a bit with this idea of abundant resources, and how we might leverage the resources that we have at our disposal, which might be just the creativity of the people that we have at our that are working in our team. High levels of communication between teams. So if we've got lots of different divisions or very structured units in our organisational structure, the ability for them to communicate with each other is a good factor that can contribute and stimulate innovation. Minimal time pressure, which is not usually the norm these days, but so having either space to create that minimal time pressure and punctuate that through the year or the week or whatever, You know, you might be familiar with Google's discretionary time principle, where people have 20% of their time, normally they're programmers, to work on any project that they care about. And so they can do that then at their own leisure, and it's designed to help them have that ability to have both autonomy, but also to just reduce the time pressure attached to that particular piece of work, which will help them be more innovative. And then work and non-work support. So working in a supportive environment where you feel like you can either access the resources that you need to do your job well, or that you're treated, you know, well as a person. Having that structural support is also important in terms of stimulating innovation. We then have our human resource variables. So this is the way we kind of treat people, and how the interpersonal relations work. So having a high commitment to training and development, so continually helping people to grow and learn more, is kind of creates, you know, we talked in our last section about learning environments and learning organizations. So helping people maintain that sense of learning and development. High levels of job security. So, you know, again, in a modern world, this isn't necessarily very common. And so if we're in organizations where we don't have much job security, we can think of this as something that might stifle people's ability to be innovative. And so how might we manage that, either in terms of giving people more job security, longer term contracts, or helping them kind of feel a sense of security around their job. And then just hiring creative people, which probably isn't going to be so much of an issue for you in the creative industries. And then we have our variables that sit at the organizational culture level. And this can also sit at the global culture level, right? So we looked at culture both in terms of the way that the organizational culture works, as well as in one of our earlier modules, when we looked at the external environment, we looked at the culture of the country. And so these things can either work in conflict or support and endorse each other. And so generally speaking, if we work within an organization and a culture that has a higher acceptance of ambiguity, so that, you know, a level of comfort that we don't know necessarily the answers all the time. We don't necessarily know what the outcomes of this are going to be. So let's just try it anyway, and manage the ambiguity that goes with that. And tolerance of the impractical as well, right? So being able to kind of go, all right, we're not really sure how this is going to work. Let's work it out. A culture that has low external controls. So again, this goes back to our sense of autonomy and our sense of self-efficacy, that we have the capacity to do something. Where we have a lot of controls over us, so where we're kind of, there's a lot of rules, we don't get a lot of say in how things are done, and we're fairly restricted and limited, that can really limit our ability to be innovative. Organizational culture and risk tolerance, generally speaking, is a contributor to innovation. So tolerance of risk doesn't necessarily mean being super risk-taking, but it means that risks is kind of considered as part of normal life, and the way we do things. And so we work to manage the risks and have an awareness of the risks, and have that tolerance that it's okay, we're just going to work this out and we're going to do the best we can with the risk that we're going to take on. Tolerance of conflict as well. So both in terms of interpersonal conflict, that doesn't mean fighting, but the ability to disagree. So there's a concept called psychological safety, which has been shown to be a particular feature of very strong teams. This came out of a big Google study that looked at the features of effective teams, and they found that psychological safety, which is people's sense that they can disagree, be who they are, or that they can make a mistake and that they won't be kind of punished or ridiculed for having made that mistake, is a big factor in the effectiveness of the team. And so being able to disagree and still get along, being able to kind of see things that might be at odds with each other. So this, this procedure or this way of doing things in the organization is in conflict with this. Okay, let's work it out. So that tolerance and ability to manage and navigate conflict is a good contributor to being able to be innovative in an organization. The ability to focus on ends as opposed to means or kind of rules. So this is the idea of being outcome oriented. So what do we want the future to be? And then how are we going to get there, rather than being focused so much on, no, this is how we do things, and well, that we just do them this way and don't worry about what the outcome is. Having that focus on ends is a good stimulator of innovation capacity. This open system focus refers to, so you may remember back in our first module where we looked at the idea of a systems approach to the organisation. So the idea that organisations have inputs, transformations, processes, and then outputs. So basic model, we input our raw materials, we then turn those materials into a product, and then we ship those products and sell those products. As the basic idea of as an organization, as a system. And an open system means that has a connection to the external world. And so having this ability to kind of see the organization within its context, so within its environment, and seeing it within that, how all those interconnections work, rather than seeing the organization in isolation, helps us to be more innovative as well. And then the idea of positive feedback. So this isn't just about kind of saying, oh, you're so great, you're so awesome. It's much more about how do we communicate with each other in a way that helps elevate people's strengths and gives them the ability to learn and grow. And so being able to give people that feedback that helps them to learn and grow, rather than just kind of makes them feel good. We need both in order to have effective feedback and positive feedback. And as well as at an interpersonal level, we also need the ability to have feedback in terms of our actual systems and processes, right? So being able to learn about, is our organization working well? And how do we build and grow as an organization, both in terms of, getting feedback from customers, getting feedback from people within the organization, getting feedback from our external environment, so that we can actually use that feedback to improve what we do and to come up with new ideas. All right, so that's our big innovation variables. I'll let you sort of digest them and think about, where do you think you sit on each of these? Any organizations that you work for, do you give them a sort of, what out of 10 for each of these different factors? And how innovative do you think they are overall? And so then our last bit is this idea of innovation champions. And so as managers, we both want to be able to spot these people in our teams, either to, we might want to recruit them, or we might want to sort of see them in our organizations. And we also might want to think of how we build these capacities in ourselves as well. And so if we want to have an innovation-based organization and we want to be innovative, how might we identify, cultivate, and support these characteristics in people, and also be able to see who they are and help them to become better innovators. But also keeping in mind that, if everyone is an innovator and it's all just about new, that can be difficult as well. So we want to also maintain that balance and have that Goldilocks zone between some stability and ability to just have people who will just keep the organization ticking over and rolling, rather than just constantly trying to suck it into the future necessarily. And so these characteristics of people who tend to be good idea champions and innovators are that they have good sense of self-confidence, they have persistence, so they will work through these problems, and when things are kind of tough, they'll just keep going. They have an energy about them, so it sort of ties into their persistence, but it also means that they have an energy that means that they can actually keep moving things forward. They have this tendency towards risk taking. So, you know, in that last slide where we looked at these cultural factors, you'll see there that there's a bit of an alignment there around risk taking, capacity, tolerance for ambiguity, these kinds of things. But they also have this capacity to kind of recruit others to their ideas. So they can not only spot good ideas and cultivate good ideas, but they can actually communicate it to others in a way that brings people on board with those ideas. As well as having that strong sense of autonomy and the ability to have autonomy in their role so that they can actually make decisions.